Time again for Doc Jacques, your Addiction Lifeguard podcast. I am Dr. Jacques de Burkert, a psychologist, licensed professional counselor, and addiction specialist. If you are suffering from addiction, misery, trauma, whatever it is, I'm here to help. If you're in search of help to try to get your life back together, join me here at Doc Jacques, your Addiction Lifeguard, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. I wanted to be real clear about what this podcast is intended for. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes, but not considered help. If you actually need real help and you're in need of help, please seek that out. If you're in dire need of help, you can go to your nearest emergency room, or you can check into a rehab center or call a counselor like me and talk about your problems and work through them. But don't rely on a podcast to be that form of help. It's not. It's just a podcast. It's for entertainment and information only. So let's keep it in that light, all right? Have a good time, learn something, and then get the real help that you need from a professional. You know, one of the things that really is I believe strongly, and have talked about this for years in these podcasts, but also in my office and with my clients, is the understanding that trauma is the one thing that really drives us into addiction. But what's interesting is trauma. There's a debate that I have with somebody almost every time I bring it up when they're sitting across from me in treatment as to what is trauma. And it's kind of a word that has a lot of, I guess you could interpret it in a lot of different ways. But it's a pretty simple, clear thing. If you think about it, trauma is it's a lasting impact that's left on a person after experiencing an event or feeling like that left them feeling overwhelmed or frightened, scared, out of control. But the thing to understand is that it's not the event that's traumatic, because one person can experience something and it's not traumatic to them, and the person standing right next to them can be horribly traumatized by it. So there's a level of what we can accept as an individual. So it's not the event itself, it's the impact of that event. So for example, if I'm driving down the street and I see somebody get hit by a car, but I don't know either person. I don't know the person driving, and I don't know the person who got hit. I feel for the person that got hit. It's just a horrible thing to experience, but I don't have any emotional connection to it. But if I'm seeing the same situation and it's a relative that got hit by the car, I'm going to be really traumatized by that. The impact of that emotionally on me is going to be very different, significantly different than the impact of the same kind of event if I know the person, if I'm attached to them. So the situation can be the same, but only one may develop trauma from it, depending on their emotional capacity or their past experience, and then whatever they have for support. And the other thing is the difference between experiencing trauma for some people is sometimes it's a single event, like getting hit by the car. It can be a single event, or it could be repeated exposure to the thing, and there's an implication there as to how severe the person may experience that. So accidents, abuse, neglect, violence, sudden loss of a person or something, medical emergencies, chronic stress in childhood, any of those things can be causing trauma, right? Because it's the impact of the event. So those things, and it can affect not just your thinking, your mind, your body, your behavior. PTSD manifests in many different ways in people. Sometimes they lose complete space and time in that moment. They may have these flashbacks. They may be slightly distracted. They could feel the pain. And that's the whole thing about, I don't know how many of you have experienced EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, but the body holding on to that can be an issue. And so you're going to feel that in your body. But the symptoms that come out of anxiety, they could be hypervigilance, anxiety, emotional numbness, intrusive memories or thoughts get in there, sleep problems. That's a pretty common one. Sleep problems, difficulty feeling safe. It's kind of combined with the hypervigilance. There's a lot of ways that it can manifest, and that's problematic because people will not put the trauma that they've experienced and the impact of it, they won't attribute it to their chronic neck pain or back pain or their digestive system issues. They might not really think that their sleep is being interrupted by these thoughts that are in their unconscious mind of the trauma. So there's a lot of things that can happen where it manifests. And we look at that as clinicians. We look at, are you eating? Are you sleeping? Do you have pain? Is there something going on in your social life, your relationships? Is there something going on at work? I mean, we look at all those things and we ask those questions, but it's because we're trying to really discover where is the impact of the trauma being manifested. You have a short temper, you have failed relationships all the time. And in my case, we're looking at addiction. We're looking at drug usage, alcohol, chemicals, gambling, shopping, pornography, the internet, those kinds of things. So when you're experiencing trauma, it leaves an impact, and that impact is something you deal with. And however the severity of that trauma is perceived by you is how you're feeling that impact. And it's very individual. So, coping with this is problematic. So let me also explain the forms of trauma. It can be experiential, so you're experiencing it yourself. It can be secondary experience or exposure trauma where you're seeing somebody else go through this. It can be something that you've heard or that you understand has happened. It was really interesting back when 9/11 occurred. I was working in healthcare, but I was also doing some work as an administrator in healthcare. I wasn't a clinician yet, but I was also then moving into the areas of clinical education. Right, I was going through my master's program, and when that occurred, and then in the D.C. area, we had a number of other things. We had a shooter that was driving around in a car, and he was shooting people randomly on the street. That went on for a couple months. We had people that were mailing anthrax around to politicians. And it seemed like it was like every 3 months there was some new thing. And I was watching people I was doing some work in a detox center. And when these things would occur, the people in the detox center, and then my friends who were also working in rehab centers, the residents would start really freaking out because they're being re-traumatized. Physical threat, not safe. And I didn't really understand at the time in my training what was going on, but now I get it. They're being re-traumatized, and we can talk about that in a minute. But so when somebody comes into my office and they're talking to me and I start talking about trauma, there's a lot of minimizing and dismissing. Everybody that comes in and they're like, so what have you been dealing with? And they're really their own story, their own narrative of these things that they've experienced. They will minimize them, and it's a coping mechanism. So whether they're experiencing what we call big T trauma or small T traumas, and the big T traumas being major life-threatening or destabilizing events, things in their lives that are really, really critical. Those are big T traumas. The small T traumas, ongoing relationship problems, the wounding from that, your friends, they're harassing you or abandoning you, chronically being disrespected, emotional neglect, situations that kind of slowly erode over time as a person's sense of safety and self-worth is being eroded. Those are the small T traumas. They're not the big ones. Like, somebody got shot and killed or was murdered. That's a big T. So they experience these things in their lives, but then they will minimize them because they're trying to cope with them And that's how they've been coping with it, is by minimizing that. And so it didn't really, they're trying to say to themselves, it didn't really affect them. But in actuality, we know that it did. But they're trying not to have that. So I will have these discussions where somebody will say, well, this happened in childhood or that happened in childhood, but I got over it, or, it really wasn't that big of a deal. And it's quite fascinating how much I have to go back over and that retreading of that story over and over and over again until they finally start to realize just how severe that trauma is. And it's not me trying to convince them that, hey, you had a bad life. I really don't want them to have that bad life experience, but it is the truth, right? And so the concept of like revealing the truth is how we get into real sobriety. So those of you who are listening, who are loved ones of somebody who is an addict, understand there are traumas in their life. And if they're an adult and you didn't know them when they were a child, you may not know the whole story, and that's okay, but understand that you're seeing something for a reason. And so when somebody comes into my office and they're sitting in the chair across from me and I'm talking to them and I'm going through their life story, over time, it's funny, they're like, well, where do we start? And I'm tell me about yourself. And they'll tell me about their job and their relationships and maybe their children if they have them, and they stay real surfacey and in the here and now instead of going back. And then I started asking them questions like, well, where did you live before? And what did you do? And I start going backwards through their life. It's funny how they just kind of want to skim right over a whole bunch of stuff. And that's what I start kind of probing in, because I know at that moment that's okay. There's some stuff here. That's why they're skipping right over this time period or these relationships. And sure enough, there's a lot of stuff there. So if your loved one is a person who seems very guarded and quiet about their past, there might be a good reason for it, because they're coping with whatever they went through. And slowly revealing that in a therapeutic environment, like with a therapist, is key to that change. So when you have a traumatic background, A, you're going to probably minimize it. B, you're going to want to dismiss it because you don't really like going back over it again. And C, it's the root of why you have an addiction. So if you're seeing your loved one go through this and they have these disproportionate reactions or all this stuff, understand this is what they've been coping with, and that's how they got to be an addict. If you are the addict, do not be fearful of the past. You have to have the courage to move forward through that time until you can allow yourself to feel things about it in a safe environment. This is what we call processing, and however it's manifesting. So the work is based on that, and then differentiating between big T trauma and the little t trauma. Some things are big, some things are small, but you can't project your own ideas personally as to what, if the person experienced something and they say, this was very traumatic to me, that is a statement of truth. It was very traumatic to them. You listening to it, you may think, well, that's not really that big of a deal, but to them it was. And so don't minimize that part of it, because that's where you have to do the acceptance and the nurturing, right? So don't judge someone else's trauma, but at the same time, if you have trauma, don't judge your own trauma and determine that it's not a big deal. It's why it's best if you're in these experiences where you listen to other people's reaction to it. This is the whole magic of getting into the recovery community, because you can say things in the company of your peers about your life, and you do these little revealing things about it, and you tell people, and you're going to see the reaction from the people that you're talking to. And it's important that you do that, because you've been hugging the cactus the whole time, and that's just how you're trying to survive, just this horrible experience. But you've minimized all the stuff. When you tell your story and you feel in a safe environment where people are accepting of you and that thing, the result is that you get to gauge the reaction that people have. In my life, I remember telling a story to somebody about my life. It was just somebody that was a friend, and they didn't know this about me. And I said, well, yeah, this happened when I was a kid. And they had this look on their face like, are you really? And I was like, well, yeah, it was not a big deal. And they're like, wow. And they just couldn't let it go. Like, they're like, wow, that is terrible. How did they really did that? Your parents did that? I was like, well, yeah, I mean, and to me, I'm thinking, but I got through it. It wasn't I got over it. I got through it. But I'm watching this person react, and it's so disproportionate to how I'm perceiving it. And then I realized, wow, they're actually feeling something from my situation. I'm making them feel something about my situation by me telling them this, and I'm not feeling it myself. But I was. I just, that's part of why my drinking was escalating so much. And so like a little light bulb went off in my head, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really bad. But to me at the time, I just had to get through this. I had to get through it. And I did. And when you go through trauma and you don't get, like in my case, I didn't get emotional support in any way from my parents on this horrific things, it's like, what do you do with that? As a kid, what do you do with it? Well, you just kind of have to keep marching forward. And that's what I did. And that's what my clients do. Like, they just keep marching forward because they have no control. So the big T and the little T traumas, don't judge. Don't assume just because you could get through that, and you may have gotten through it and kind of unscathed, that they did as well, because they possibly didn't. So trying to figure out ways to help people cope with trauma really depends on the person that you're talking to or experiencing, whether it's a friend or relative or even a stranger, and B, so I'm doing the A, B, C's again. B, that you be patient and understanding and really kind of embrace that. But, there's so much about trauma. It's really interesting when you look at how things are happening around you and what you're experiencing versus what other people are experiencing. I had somebody tell me one time, I went through this situation, and it was somebody had died, and it was like, I went through this and I'm okay now. And, I acknowledged that it was a hard situation, but I'm okay now. And I kept listening to the I'm okay now part. Well, they're in my office because their life has completely fallen apart because they started drinking, and then they were acting very kind of recklessly around other people, and I'm okay now. I'm like, well, are you sure? And they were like, oh yeah. I got over it. I was like, okay. So then I started having them go through some re-experience of it. And I said, so tell me about it in detail. Tell me what happened. Tell me what's going on. Well, at the time. And they told me the story, and then they started giving me some details, and I kept asking for more details as I realized they were kind of glossing over things. And the reason that they were glossing over things was because they were uncomfortable. And the more they talked about it, the more uncomfortable they started to appear. They started shifting around in the chair, and then there were these long pauses, as I could tell they were re-experiencing the reality of the emotion of the experience, and it was sinking in. And I'm seeing them physically start fidgeting and being uncomfortable. And then I asked them the question after they went through this, and I got all the details from it. And I said, so how did you feel about it at the time? And the tears came. It was like just the floodgates opened, and the emotion was there. And in my head, I'm listening to their voice in my head saying, but I'm fine now. I'm fine. And I'm like, this is not fine. Now, when somebody is in that point and they're in that vulnerable state, my job as a therapist is to be supportive and guide them through, and then know what to do with them clinically to help them actually reprocess this in a way that they actually can get to a better place with it. I'm not suggesting that you talk to your family members or friends and get them worked up into that condition. I'm just saying that the level of I'm fine now may actually be like a dumpster fire underneath it. It's just the coping that they were going through. This is how they were coping. And they were coping by saying, it's fine. I'm fine. It's fine. It's that dumpster fire t-shirt. It's like, I'm fine. It's fine. I'm fine. No, you're not. That's why you are using chemicals to cope with this. And you're very destructive in your relationships. Maybe you're acting very promiscuously, or you're dismissive, or maybe you're violent, or maybe you're, lashing out in anger. You're getting fired from every job. That's not fine. And so the truth about trauma is that it's the impact it has on us. It's not the event. It's the impact. And that impact can be very long lasting. And some people, it can be for the rest of their lives. They're to some degree still feeling traumatized by the event. But my message to them is, you know what? Let's process through this. Let's talk through this. Let's give this a different framing for you. Because, like if you have a parent, let's say, that was abusive to you and they died a long time ago. Well, now they're reaching out over time and through space to continue to traumatize you because you're not willing to be able to face this because it's not safe. And so being in an environment with a professional can put you in a safe place and allow you to reprocess that. And like Bessel van der Kolk's book about the body keeps a score, we hang on to it physically, we hang on to it emotionally, we hang on to it intellectually. And our brain is a very complex organ, and it's able to conjure things up, memories and whatever. And so we have to work through these things. And working through them means that you're reprocessing the reality. And that's what recovery is about. And that's why when we're going through the 12 steps, we try to dissect ourselves through like step 4, our searching moral inventory of our character defects. So we're trying to pull ourselves apart a little bit so we can look at what's going on and be reality, right? The belt of truth and the full armor of God, the belt of truth, and the shield of righteousness. Be able to protect ourselves from what? From the truth. Well, you're carrying the truth around with you all the time. And so when you're carrying that truth around, but you won't speak of it and you won't try to reprocess it, put it in a different light. Or as I say when I'm working with clients, we're going to put responsibility where it belongs. You should not be carrying this around as a responsibility because this is not yours to carry. So we're going to give you something else to do besides carry this around. And then some of this is also about the trauma and then the anger and the resentment and contempt that can destroy you in the process. So we're going to lay it at his feet. We're going to put it down. And so putting it down means you put it down, you don't keep a hand on it just in case you want to bring it back up. You're going to put it down. You're going to lay it at his feet. You're going to lay the anger down. So trauma is a huge contributor, and in my opinion, the primary contributor to people's addictions. So tackling that trauma is vitally important to your recovery. So I hope that you're going out there and fearlessly and courageously confronting those traumas with a professional who can help you with that, because that's really where your sobriety is. That's where it's waiting for you. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Doc Jacques, your Addiction Lifeguard. I am Dr. Jacques de Brucker, your Addiction Lifeguard, and I'm here to help you. If you need help, you can reach out to me. I'll guide you and direct you on where to get help, or help you myself. Or you could go to a counselor in your country or state, or a rehab would be awesome, especially if you're having some real struggles with recovery. But whatever the case may be, please go out there and get some help, man. It's crazy to think you're going to save your addiction by ending your life. Don't do that. Go get the help. Go get sane, stable, and sober. Do it for you. Do it for your family. Do it for your loved ones. But do it. So until next time, this is Doc Shock saying, see ya.